What's going on, everyone, and welcome to Movie Emporium's movie review of A Journal for Jordan. This film, of course, is directed by Denzel Washington. Now, before we begin, if you like this video, awesome, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium, hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome, hit that like button, as well as commenting below on any video that you watch, including this one. So based off the article from, of course, Dana Kennedy, who's a Pulitzer Prize winning author, this is the story of her and how she met Charles Monroe King, who's played by Michael B. Jordan in this movie. Her character, of course, is played by Chanté Adams, and it's in essence a romantic drama about how they met, how they grew to love each other, about how, unfortunately, Charles Monroe King died, and then their birth of their son, who of course is Jordan himself, and about the journal that his father wrote for him and kind of the life lessons he taught. So this is a movie, in its essence, is about what a father teaches his son or his daughter, and how the romance and how, even after somebody's gone, how that impacts our life. And it's a kind of a sweeping drama in a lot of aspects, as well as being a romantic drama, because there's a lot of love, a lot of romance, and a lot of, heartbreak and stuff like that, as romantic dramas do. And that's the synopsis in a nutshell. There's not really much to it outside of just being a romantic drama with some heartbreak in the end. So, like I said in my synopsis, this is a story, an article that was written by Dana Kennedy herself. She's, of course, a Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times bestselling author. And it's a story that, is well-regarded, pretty famous at this point, but is also a story I've never heard of before, which is what happens with a lot of these movies, or these stories that get turned into films. You're like, oh my god, how have I never heard of this before? Where did this come from? And a lot of times it's just because you're either too busy or you just kind of just not learn about it. You just kind of goes over your head, floats under the radar, and all that good stuff. So it's the unfortunate nature, but what is nice is when, Hollywood gets in control of something like this, for instance, like A Beautiful Mind, they're able to tell these stories and get even more exposure and more credence to the world, so a lot of people can learn about it. And on top of that, you have somebody like a screenwriter like Virgil Williams writing it, who's a pretty popular screenwriter, and you have Denzel Washington directing it, who we know is one of the greatest actors of all time. So all that said and done, I still never heard of this movie till like 2 months ago, which is a rarity for me when it comes to knowing about movies. So going into a movie like this, only seeing the one trailer, I knew a little bit about what I was going to get myself into, but I didn't know the overarching story, the overarching acts, and so on and so forth. So I went in kind of blind with this movie. And on top of that, I got to see this movie like a month and a half early, which is pretty crazy. Usually I'll see a movie till like a week or two beforehand. And so with that said, my honest opinion about just not knowing this project, the question honestly remains when it comes to my review: is it a film worth watching? Is it a film that works on a storytelling level? How's the direction, character, and all that stuff? Basically, is it a movie worth going to see in the theater? And I will say this for this film, I actually kind of enjoyed this film. I thought it was a pretty decent film. Yes, it has a lot of problems, which I'll talk about. But what I found about this movie that I liked about it is the honest nature of it, the relatability to it, the fact that even though the romance is a little saccharine and sweet in a lot of aspects and feels a little too unrealistic in just how it comes together, it's a movie that still has two dynamic characters, two interesting kind of different characters who somehow find a way to not only be relatable with one another, but their character and how they interact with the audience in a storytelling level makes it easy for the audience to relate to that character dynamic, because there are a lot of people who go through this exact same situation who may have had somebody in the military or had somebody in life that has passed away, and they just had a kid, and how do they deal with that? And that's what this story in this movie does. It definitely explores that situation, explores those things. I wish it would have done a little bit better, and strangely this movie's 2 hours and 20 minutes and it still feels like it could have explored more. But I think for the most part, I think this story is just a really interesting, really thought-provoking story about just, how do individuals find each other, and how does that work, and how do you deal when you're in two different scenarios, and what do you do when that scenario has a very sad and situation come up, and I guess you could say. But it's also helped from the simple fact that, Chanté Adams and Michael B. Jordan are actually really good in this movie. The one thing I've always said about Michael B. Jordan is each movie he stars in, or each movie that he's in, he gets much, much better as an actor, to the point where it almost seems flawless. And yes, he has like the physique, and he's very very handsome individual, as we all know, but he's also an actor that takes his role seriously. He does a really nice job with what he's doing, and he never seems like he just doesn't care, you know, which what happens to a lot of actors as they get older. So it's really nice to see him, even in a story that may be a little too, like I said, saccharine and sweet. It really feels like he's like that person, like he's really caring about, you know, the Dana Kennedy character, about his son, and it feels like an honest portrayal. It's the same thing with Chanté Adams, who has to pull a lot of the heavy lifting in this movie, and I think she does a really nice job. I just think sometimes the story kind of falters under its own weight. It feels like it's buckling a little bit. And that's just in the nature that you have to tell a story that, if you told in a realistic nature, would actually be quite boring until the points where you learn about, you know, him dying and stuff like that. But when they turn it into a Hollywood story and they, you know, script it for, you know, the audience of film, they have to kind of twist and turn a little bit of stuff to make it more interesting and more entertaining. But sometimes that doesn't work, and sometimes that feels a little, like I said, a little too buckling under its own weight. And a lot of times, a lot of that storytelling element, when it comes to like the buckling, it can be a problem of like the scriptwriter or the director, which of course is Denzel Washington, which I don't want to hate on Denzel Washington because he's so great as he is, but you can tell like sometimes that they're maybe just going a little too longer than they need to, going a little too farther. I mean, you could trim this like by 10 minutes and would have been fine, but sometimes it feels like there's something that they're doing a little too much of their flourishes and a little too much of their stuff that makes the movie buckle under its own weight, which is not like the major problem, like the major problem, because some films can be a major problem, but when it comes to a film like this, it is noticeable in a lot of aspects. But other than that, there's not really much else to talk about with the story. Like I said, it looks good, it's directed well, it has great actors in it. Yes, it has some problems, but it feels like a traditional film, a very low-key film that releases on Christmas. So with that said, I still recommend it. I still think it's an interesting film, and it's very emotional when it needs to be, so I give it that much credit. So that's it. That'll be my take on A Journal for Jordan. Thank you so much for watching. In the comments below, have you heard of this story before? Do you know anything about this story? All that good stuff. Let me know in the comments. But otherwise, if you like what you see on this channel, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming in next. If you like any of these videos, awesome. Hit that like button. And as always, we'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.